Dobro jutro, dobar dan, prilično eksplozivan početak našeg drugog dana. Može slobodno da odmah namjestimo za panel koji će nešto kasnije uslijediti. Dakle, dobar dan i dobrodošli na drugi dan Smart Industry konferencije u organizaciji poslovnog dnevnika. Ovi koji ste bili jučer s nama, bilo vam je super, oni koji niste bili, puno toga ste propustili, ali danas je jedan odličan program pred nama. Sinoć smo zaključili cijelu stvar, od 21:30 bio jedan party. Vidim neka lica koja su bila sinoć tamo. Ja kad sam došao u sobu, još taman da malo otvorim, kako se zove, internet, da pogledam neke vijesti i onda vidim naslov, a jučer smo pričali zapravo o tome, kaže novo otkriće u fizici, otkriće pokazuje da živimo u simulaciji, da živimo u matricu. Nemam reći jer nisam mogu oka sklopiti više. Dakle, uglavnom, dokazano je da prema drugom zakonu infodinamike, ja kao laik sam čak skužio taj tekst, vi bi ga vjerojatno lako štivo pred spavanje. Uglavnom, u prirodi prema termodinamici sve teži prema kaosu, u infodinamici sve teži prema redu. Dakle, odbacuje se ono sve što je višak da ne zagušuje prostor. To je drugi zakon infodinamike. I onda su našli u prirodi prema DNK, RNA, prema pahuljicama, prema vodi, prema svemu, su našli zapravo princip taj infodinamike koji ne bi tu trebao biti. Dakle, da ide prema redu, a ne prema kaosu, i toga su zaključili, dakle, neko je sve nas dobro isprogramirao. Dakle, mi se nalazimo u nekoj simulaciji, na nekom kompjuteru, Simsi ili nešto, neko ima svoju ulogu, neko tamo klikće po nama, tako da evo, želim vam ugodan dan i sigurno nećete uopće više razmišljati o tome što sam sada rekao. Uglavnom, da nastavimo mi sa programom, nemojte razmišljati o ovome, ne živimo u simulaciji. Imate svoju slobodnu volju. Digitalna transformacija zajedno s demokracijom, diverzifikacijom, demografijom postala je dio 4D priča o razvoju Nove Indije. Interesantna je činjenica kako se 45%, dakle gotovo polovica globalnih transakcija odvija u Indiji. Poljoprivreda, obrazovanje, infrastruktura te svi ostali sektori pokazuju pamet digitalnog osnaživanja na toj osnovnoj razini. Također, mi smo jučer pričali ovdje, imali smo i gosta, vidim da je još uvijek tu sa nama iz Crne Gore, dakle pitanje radne snage u IT sektoru. Sve je to pažljivo slušao veleposlanik Indije u Hrvatskoj, oni nemaju tih problema, ali čućemo njihova iskustva i možda neka prilika za povezivanje i međusobno osnaživanje. Zašto ne? S nama je danas njegova ekscelencija Raj Kumar Srivastava, veleposlanik Indije u Hrvatskoj. Your Excellency.
Good morning. Dobro jutro. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. 3 months back, when Mr. Vladimir Dishovich came to me and proposed that I should participate in this Smart Industry Conference in Šibenik, without even looking at the details, I said yes, I will. But then, 2 weeks back, when I saw the program details, I thought that I had to change my presentation. Because smart industry, as you all know, is about Industry 4.0 or Industry 5.0. It's more about application of digital transformation to industry. But when I saw the details of this conference particularly, it was more about ICT, AI, and more about digital transformation of society. And that's why I thought it is perfect to present what India has been able to do in the last 6 years in the frame of digital public infrastructure. So that's my presentation of next 15 minutes. But before that, let me begin by, India, genetically, it has been proven, is at least 75,000 years old civilization. Archaeologically and astronomically, it has been proven that it is at least 15,000-year-old civilization. Written history, it is at least 3,000-year-old. So it's an old foundation. But today, in this presentation, I'm talking to you about last decade. This is about a story of New India. And New India is defined by in a very simple way, 3 Ds and 3 S's. The 3 Ds of democracy, demography, and diversity. And 3 S's of speed, scale, and sensitivity. And let me spend some time about these 3 Ds and 3 S's, because that you will see in this presentation in most of the slides, and that's why I'm setting the background. Democracy, it's the largest democracy, 1.4 billion people. And mind you, it is also the oldest democracy, because there are evidences that democracy was there in the 10th century in India. It is demography-wise, 1.4 billion people, average age is 29. Diversity. Anybody who has been to India, if they drive 200 kilometers, they find change of food, change of physical features, and diversity all around. And that is probably, I was talking to my friend Harvey Bolan in the breakfast today, that one of the key essence of India is diversity, and that is very common to see in the design of the universe. Because from the Big Bang, whether that Big Bang is correct or not, that's another debate. From the Big Bang, continuously there is expansion and diversity creation all around. So diversity should be appreciated, because that's the natural process. Uniformity is not the way. Diversity is the natural process. So these are the 3 Ds which define New India, and 3 S's, speed, scale, and sensitivity. We need to work at speed, because it is almost like running on a treadmill. If you don't have speed, you will go backwards. Scale. If you are looking at 1.4 billion people, your initiative should be such that is it going to affect 1 billion people? If it is not, government should not focus its energy and time on it, because ultimately you are looking at the scale. And sensitivity towards people, we are democracy, and towards environment, because ultimately we are talking about leaving something for the future generation. We should be doing things which are climate sensitive. So with that background, we begin with what is digital public infrastructure, which has become a very, very common buzzword in the developmental institution like UNDP, IMF. So if you want to have a detailed presentation about this DPI, just go a search on internet, DPI IMF, DPI UNDP, and you will find documents which explain in detail the revolution that has taken place in India on digital public infrastructure. So when you talk about DPI, there are 3 approaches, and Government of India has adopted the middle path, which is normally the case in India. We always go for middle path. So there is all government approach, which is single provider, slow innovation. That means you have problem of speed, because you can't have that speed. When you go all private, which is mostly in the Western world that we have seen, the Googles and Microsoft and Amazons of the world, there is a problem of monopolies. There is a problem of all people do not getting the share of the growth story. So there is something good on the left, something good on the right. The middle path is about finding out the best of the 2 worlds and going forward. So DPI approach in India has been to address the diversity and choice, to encourage innovation and competition, and ensuring openness and sovereignty. India's approach has been 3-pronged: technology, market, and governance. On technology, establishing protocols and standards to ensure interoperability and portability. Market, which brings the innovation and competitiveness, and governance, which brings the design principle, legal setup, and trying to embed in the code the legal system, so that we don't have to worry about how it is legally taken care of. The code itself has the legal architecture. Design principles: data is federated by design, reducing the risk of surveillance. There is always this said that if the government is going to do it, all the public data will be in the hands of the government, but it is not the case. The design of this DPI in India is such that data remains where it should be. It's only at the time of a particular action that data comes together and that action is taking place. Data is not taken away. That means you are not having that data storage And that allows us the anonymity of the data, that allows us that privacy concerns are taken care of. India, by the way, on 9th of August this year, had come out with its data privacy law, which was after almost 1.5 years of consultations, wide consultations. So India has a data privacy law from the August 2023. Modular building blocks allow legal principles to apply across the ecosystems. Governance through protocols enables more direct regulatory control, and unbundled digital workflows simplify legal compliance and code-assured compliance. These are the principles which people who work in DPI would understand better, and I think people like us should not be needing to understand it. Embed law in code that I mentioned, it's very important so that law doesn't become, or legal hurdles should not become a problem. The code itself is legally taking care of it. Okay, now this is about India's story. And that means that we will go through the timeline of what happened in India. So in 2008, India was one of the world's most unbanked nations. Less than 20% of the people in India had bank accounts. So it was said that there was no ID card, like an ID card for the whole country. KYC operations were very difficult. Know your customer operations were very difficult. Bank branches were inaccessible, and lack of connectivity, internet. This is 2008, 15 years back. Cash transfers, 20 to 40% of the cash transfer to the poor people was leaked, corruption. Middlemen were taking away 20 to 40%. In fact, in 1985, the then Prime Minister of India said 90% leakage. That means the subsidy that was going to the poor people, only 10% was reaching, 90% was going. It improved from 90% leakage to 20 to 40% leakage, but that also is a big amount of money for a government, for a country like India. Duplicate and ghost beneficiaries. How this leakage used to happen? Because IDs were created and there were ghost people, like there was laborers who were never working, but they were drawing the salary. Physical cash payments, naturally the middleman will take away his commission. Exclusion of beneficiaries. Real beneficiaries do not get it. Delayed mission reporting, that means you report it differently. So all these problems were there in 2008. As per 2008 levels, it was estimated it would take India half a century to reach banking penetration of 80%. This was the prediction in 2008. And see what happened. We achieved it not in 5 decades, in 1 decade. How it happened? Because in 2014, in Indian democratic elections, a person named Prime Minister Modi joined the Indian central government. And this is a person who was never scared of doing right things, even though it may cost him elections. And that's why whatever he did was all known in our economics books to be the right economics, but it was never a right politics because they were scared about losing elections because people will go against it. There will be a lot of revolution about how it will affect people. But he did not take those kind of challenges in a negative way. He went ahead, he had 54% majority. He did a lot of changes, and then he got next election 67% majority. Which means that if you do the right economics, it can become right politics. So in this period, India has changed from 2008 to 2018. Everybody in India had the bank account. In 2009, we started the unique identification number program, which was slowly moving, but after 2014, understanding the importance of unique identification for each of the Indian citizen, this program was put on an accelerated mode. And that's why today, 1.36 billion ID cards are there in India, which are 3 levels. Biometric, that means nobody can fake it. Demographic, that means data is collected in terms of age group of people. It's not about individuals' privacy, it's about creating data which can be useful economically. Demographic. And the third layer is geographic. That means you can communicate with the individuals if you have to, through emails or through. So 3 layers, 12-digit ID number, which has biometric, which has demographic, and which has geographic. This is during the last decade. India built world's largest direct benefit transfer system. And imagine 322 billion was transferred in this decade from government to the poor people. 27 billion of that has been saved because of the efficiency. $1.5 billion was the expenditure to do this program of DPI. 1.5 billion for unique identification number, but 27 was saved. That tells you it's an economic proposition. It's not a welfare scheme. It's 1.5 billion expenditure, 27 billion saved for the government. India also transformed its G2P architecture, that is government to people. This enabled resilience during the pandemic. When pandemic happened, one of the biggest challenge was how to allow people to have food. And for that, this unique identification number, banking, and mobile telephony, these three, Trinity, has helped Government of India to ensure that during the pandemic, nobody slept hungry. This is some of the data that how this DPI has helped governance becoming transparent, trustworthy, and corruption-free. In DPI's execution in the 2009-10 to 21-22, 12 years time, GDP of India has gone 3.58 times. Tax collection, revenue collection has gone 4 times. And saving of 27 billion in direct benefit transfer. So it's a proposition for every democratic country to think about that digital public infrastructure is like roads, railways, and ports. You provide that infrastructure, you will reap the benefit faster. It's a fast gestation product. It's not like big infrastructure physical projects. DPI also unblocks massive private innovation, and that is biggest part of it. Because if you have a talented pool of resources, they need that level playing field where they can innovate. So what happens that, like in physical infrastructure, you have railways, roads, cell towers, internet cables. In digital infrastructure, you have open tech standards, systems for identity, digital payment, and beyond, which means data. And all that drives private innovation. What is the 3 foundational block of Indian DPI? Identity infrastructure, Aadhaar as we call it. We have already explained. Second is payment infrastructure. Now, when we started this digital payment system in 2016, India was having probably 0% of point something percent of digital payments in the world in India. Today, 45% of global digital transactions take place in India. 45%, which in numbers come to this that roughly 8 billion transactions in 1 month, 260 million people use it, or 260 million accounts use it. In Croatian population terms, let me explain it. It means every day, 1 million transactions used by 33,000 people. If in Croatia you have 1 million transactions every day and 33,000 people using it, that is what is happening in India. And the third layer is data and credentialing infrastructure, which we call DigiLocker, which is very important because this is the most important layer. You create the unique identification, you make sure that your payment system are secured, and then what happens, economic activity takes place over that through the data. So all your documents, which are available in different platforms, can be digitized using the APIs, which is the application programming interface, which is done by private sectors at competitive rates. So you use your DPI, digital public infrastructure, for making your economic activity more efficient and much more at a scale. So this is what we have achieved, 1.36 billion unique identification numbers over the period. And who did it? This is very important to understand. The person who was behind it is the person in 1990 who established the company called Infosys. Today, Infosys is a brand name. It's available in Croatia, also in Karlovac. They have the office. And next, I think, week, there is AI for Future conference, and one of the person from Infosys will be speaking. The person who established Infosys, Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who was the force behind this Aadhaar project. So he was given the rank of a cabinet minister for 5 years, and he executed this program across the government ministries. So he was sitting in Planning Commission of India as a cabinet minister, as a technocrat, and he executed this program. No ministry could have asked the question because it was getting instructions directly from the Prime Minister. So this is the story. In 2016, India used mostly cash, 5 million POS machines, less than 7% debit card, and in 6 years' time, 1 trillion annual transactions are taking place on digital platforms. DigiLocker, which is the third layer, it's about ID docs, tax returns, vaccine certifications. You know, during the pandemic, 87% of Indian population got vaccines produced in India, made in India, and everybody had a digital certificate. Nobody printed them. It was all there in mobile phones. Education is skill certificates. So your certificates, because they are connected to your biometric card, they can't be faked anymore, and they can be utilized through the APIs. Unified learner passport. So we are moving towards passport also becoming a digital passport, and probably we don't have to have a physical passport less than 5 years from now. We can just walk through to the aircraft and somebody will check it without touching us. Business licenses, so making you KYC, know your customer, and as a business, who are you? That's also established through these mechanisms. Now this is very important because from the privacy standards, account aggregator, these are APIs which basically connect the DigiLocker documents to the actual economic activity. And what happens that data is federated, as I mentioned, so there is no collection of data at one particular place. It is anonymized if it is, for example, medical records. Imagine the benefits for the healthcare industry. If you have 1.4 billion people and their health data is anonymized, but with demography, with your geographic data, you can actually make research much more useful to the humanity. Because you will have, okay, in this age group, when you give this medication, these are the responses. And you can develop medicines accordingly. As you know, India's pharmaceutical industry is very, very potent. So this will have huge implication for medical research in India. Now, the next phase, where will be the next growth that will happen? Credit. And that will create economic benefit because if MSMEs can get the credit fast enough, sitting in their houses, then they can work much faster. So credit growth, logistics, which is the biggest challenge, which used to be the biggest challenge, but the last mile connectivity is now happening because like APIs, startups in India are providing last mile connectivity. So logistics have become much better from 3 months to less than a month. That means scale of economy is like 67% improvement. And e-commerce, this is very important. All of us have become habitual of doing shopping on Amazon, but when you do it on ONDC is Open Network Digital Commerce. When you do in ONDC, it becomes cheaper, it becomes much more affordable because there are no commissions, it's open source. So that ONDC platform is becoming a big revolution in India. It is becoming platform agnostic, it is becoming competitive, and it allows a small player also to play the same game which the big players play because platform is same, it does not distinguish between rich and poor. Unblocking access to credit, this is the first part. It is explaining how your Aadhaar, that means your eKYC, electronically know your customer data, UPI, that is the payment system, your data, and finally e-sign, that means you actually authenticate that you are authenticating that transaction. You can do this digital transfer of credit. And that's why economic activity at the SME level in India has tremendously increased. This is the best way to create inclusive growth in an economy which was rich and poor economy. It is now a middle class economy where everybody is growing because of these digital opportunities. Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC. This is a new architecture which is improving small-scale handicraft people sitting in my village town, sending their products to Europe. using ONDC. And this is going to increase because it will take away again the middlemen. Like middleman was taken away in the subsidy, now the middleman will be taken away in the digital commerce. This is the example of how some of the logistics and the travel platforms have been created using the same digital public infrastructure. And finally, this is very important. I talked about the third D, diversity. In India, you have 200 dialects, 22 languages in our constitution. So language becomes a big barrier, but digitally, we have solved that problem by open software, open access software called Bhashini. Bhasha means language in our Sanskrit. Bhashini is a software which allows AI to use translation from any language to any language in India. And this was used during the G20 summit when all the G20 leaders came to India on 9th and 10th September. All leaders could see all the documents in their language using Bhashini. And this was based on AI. This was not based on anybody making a program. It is AI. So, of course, you have to put a lot of data of languages beforehand, but once you have put it, it is like ChatGPT. So that platform was very much appreciated during the G20 summit, and now it is a very common protocol in India for avoiding the problem of language translations. Now, this is what the last part of my presentation. It's talking about how DPI, being a humanity-driven initiative, it should not restrain into India. And we have already started discussions with 8 countries in Global South, that means in Africa, in Southeast Asia, who are trying to implement the same model in their countries. The model is like this. Like some examples, with France, we have this kind of cooperation, infrastructures and Viva Tech. Joint statements we have issued in the level of Quad, that is India, Australia, Japan, and US. EU TTC, that is Trade and Technology Council. US and France bilaterally. We have signed MOUs with countries, 8 of them very active ones, where the action is taking place. And I mentioned about G20. In G20, one of the key outcomes was recognition of DPI as a very important aspect of human development. Now, there are 3 ways to look at it: bilateral engagement, multilateral engagement, and open access engagement. What each one of them, we have explained that what are the pros, what are the cons. For example, when you look at the big countries, this kind of multilateral engagement is good because everybody brings something positive to the table. When you look at open access engagement, it's a yoga model. That yoga knowledge is there, but every country has their own yoga studios. Similarly, if DPI model is known, every country has its own model, basically utilizing the same model, that universal wisdom is there. You have to utilize it as it suits to you. And finally, operationalization, we can think about 3 different ways. The middle one is applicable to Croatia. It talks about there are 75 small nations with less than 1 million population, and there are 30 countries with population between 1 million and 5 million. So around about 100 countries in the world are below 5 million population. For them, it might be useful to just take plug and play mechanism, that you have a ready-made solution, you just employ it. So all those models are thought about in India, and we will take it accordingly, not restrain it only an Indian revolution. It will be a global revolution, which will be led not only by India, but UNDP, IMF, because it is a successful model. That's where I end. Thank you so much.